If you refuse, Mance Raider said, Tormund Giantsbane will sound the horn of winter 3 days hence at dawn. He could carry the message back to Castle Black and tell them of the horn, but if he left Mance still alive, Lord Janos and Sir Alistair would seize on that as proof that he was a Turncloak. 1,000 thoughts flickered through Jon's head. If I can destroy the horn, smash it here and now. But before he could begin to think that through, he heard the low moan of some other horn, made faint by the tense hide walls. Mance heard it too. Frowning, he went to the door. Jon followed. The warhorn was louder outside. Its call had stirred the wildling camp. 3 hornfoot men jogged past, carrying spears. Horses were whinnying and snorting, giants roaring in the old tongue, and even the mammoths were restless. Outrider's horn, Tormund told Mance. Something's coming. Varamir sat cross-legged on the half-frozen ground. His wolves circled restlessly around him. A shadow swept over him, and Jon looked up to see the eagle's blue-gray wings, coming from the east. When the dead walk, walls and stakes and swords mean nothing, he remembered. You cannot fight the dead, Jon Snow. No man knows that half so well as me. Harma scowled. East? The whites should be behind us. East, the skinchanger repeated. Something's coming. The others? Jon asked. Mance shook his head. The others never come when the sun is up. Chariots were rattling across the killing ground, jammed with riders waving spears of sharpened bone. The king groaned. Where the bloody hell do they think they're going? Quinn, get these fools back to where they belong. Someone bring my horse. The mare, not the stallion. I want my armor, too. Mance glanced suspiciously at the wall. Atop the icy parapets, the straw-colored soldiers stood collecting arrows, but there was no sign of any other activity. Harma, mount up your raiders. Tormund, find your sons and give me triple line of spears. Aye, said Tormund, striding off. The mousy little skin changer closed his eyes and said, I see them. They're coming along the streams and game trails. Who? Men. Men on horses, men in steel and men in black. Crows. Mance made the word a curse. He turned on Jon. Did my old brothers think they'd catch me with my breeches down if they attacked while we were talking? If they planned an attack, they never told me about it. Jon did not believe it. Lord Janos lacked the men to attack the wildling camp. Besides, he was on the wrong side of the wall and the gate was sealed with rubble. He had a different sort of treachery in mind. This can't be his work. If you're lying to me again, you won't be leaving here alive, Mance warned. His guards brought him his horse and armor. Elsewhere around the camp, Jon saw people running at cross purposes. Some men forming as if to storm the wall while others slipped into the woods. Women driving dog carts east. Mammoths wandering west. He reached back over his shoulder and drew Longclaw just as a thin line of rangers emerged from the fringes of the wood 300 yards away. They wore black mail, black half-helms, and black cloaks. Half-armored, Mance drew his sword. You knew nothing of this, did you? He said to Jon coldly. Slow as honey on a cold morning, the rangers swept down on the wildling camp, picking their way through clumps of gorse and stands of trees, over roots and rocks. Wildlings flew to meet them, shouting war cries and waving clubs and bronze swords and axes made of flint, galloping headlong at their ancient enemies. A shout, a slash, and a fine brave death. Jon had heard his brothers say of the free folk and their way of fighting. Believe what you will, Jon told the king beyond the wall, but I knew nothing of any attack. Harma thundered past before Mance could reply, riding at the head of 30 raiders. Her standard went before her, a head dog impaled on a spear raining blood at every stride. Mance watched as she smashed into the rangers. Might be you're telling it true, he said. Those look like Eastwatch men, sailors on horses. Cotter Pike always had more guts than sense. He took the Lord of Bones at Lord Barrow. He might have thought to do the same with me, if so, he's a fool. He doesn't have the men. Mance! The shout came. It was a scout bursting from the trees on a lathered horse. Mance, there's more! They're all around us. Iron men, iron! A host of iron men. Cursing, Mance swung up onto his saddle. Varamir, stay and see no harm comes to Dala. The king beyond the wall pointed his sword at Jon. And keep a few extra eyes on this crow. If he runs, rip out his throat. Aye, I'll do that. The skin changer was a head shorter than Jon, slumped and soft, but that Shadowcat can disembowel him with one paw. They're coming from the north too, Vermeer told Mance. You best go. Mance donned his helm with his raven wings. His men were mounted up as well. Arrowhead, Mance snapped. To me, form wedge. Yet when he slammed his heels into the mare and flew across the field at the Rangers, the men who raced to catch him lost all semblance of formation. Jon took a step toward the tent, thinking of the Horn of Winter. But the Shadowcat blocked him, tail lashing. The beast's nostrils flared, and slaver ran from his curved tent teeth. He smells my fear. He missed Ghost more than ever, at that point. The two wolves were behind him, growling. Banners, he heard Vermeer murmur. I see golden banners. Oh. A mammoth lumbered by, trumpeting a half-dozen bowmen in the wooden tower on its back. The king! No! Then the skinchanger threw back his head and screamed. The sound was shocking, ear-piercing, thick with agony. Vermeer fell, writhing, and the cat was screaming too. And high in the eastern sky against the wall of cloud, Jon saw the eagle burning. For a heartbeat, it flamed brighter than a star, wreathed in red and gold and orange, its wings beating wildly at the air as if it could fly from the pain. Higher it flew, and higher still. The scream brought Val out of the tent, white-faced. What is it? What's happened? Vermeer's wolves were fighting each other, and the Shadowcat had raced off into the trees. But the man was still twisting on the ground. What's wrong with him? Val demanded, horrified. Where's Mance? There, Jon pointed. Gone to fight. The king led his ragged wedge into a knot of rangers, his sword flashing. Gone? He can't be gone, not now, it started. The battle? He watched the rangers scatter before Harma bloodied his dog's head. The raiders screamed and hacked and chased the men in black back into the trees. But there were more men coming from the wood, a column of horses. Knights on heavy horse, Jon saw. Harma had to regroup and wheel to meet them, but half her men had raced too far ahead. The birth! Val was shouting at him. Trumpets were blowing all around, loud and brazen. The wildlings have no trumpets, only warhorns. They knew that as well as he did. The sound sent free folk running in confusion. Some toward the fighting, others away. A mammoth was stomping through a flock of sheep that 3 men were trying to herd off west. The drums were beating as the wildling ran to form squares and lines, but they were too late, too disorganized, too slow. The enemy was emerging from the forest, from the east, the northeast, the north. 3 great columns of heavy horse, all dark, glinting steel and bright wool surcoats. Not the men of the East Watch. Those had been no more than a line of scouts. An army? The king? Jon was as confused as the wildlings. Could Robb have returned? Had the boy on the Iron Throne finally bestirred himself? You best get back inside the tent, he told Val. Across the field, one column had washed over Harmouth Dogshed. Another smashed into the flank of Tormund's spearmen as he and his sons desperately tried to turn them. The giants were climbing onto their mammoths, though, and the knights on the barded horses did not like that at all. He could see how the coursers and destroyers screamed and scattered at the sight of those lumbering mountains. But there was fear on the wildling side as well. Hundreds of women and children rushing away from the battle, some of them blundering right under the hooves of Garrons. He saw an old woman's dog cart veer into the path of 3 chariots to send them crashing into each other. Gods, Val whispered. Gods, why are you doing this? Go inside the tent and stay with Dalla. It's not safe out here. It wouldn't be a great deal safer inside, but she didn't need to hear that. I need to find the midwife, Val said. You're the midwife. I'll stay here until Mance comes back. He had lost sight of Mance, but now he found him again, cutting his way through a knot of mounted men. The mammoths had shattered the center column, but the other 2 were closing like pincers. On the eastern edge of the camp, some archers were loosing fire arrows at the tents. He saw a mammoth pluck a knight from his saddle and fling him 40 feet with a flick of its trunk. Wildlings streamed past. Women and children running from the battle, some with men hurrying them along. A few of them gave Jon dark looks, but Longclaw was in his hand, and no one troubled him. Even Vermeer fled, crawling off on his hands and knees. More and more men were pouring from the trees, not only knights now, but free riders and mounted bowmen and men-at-arms and jacks and kettle helms. Dozens of men, hundreds of men. A blaze of banners flew above them. The wind was whipping them too wildly for Jon to see the sigils, but he glimpsed a seahorse, a field of birds, a ring of flowers, and yellow, so much yellow. Yellow banners with a red device? Whose arms were those? East and northeast he saw a band of wildlings try to stand and fight, but the attackers rode right over them. The free folk still had the numbers, but the attackers had steel armor and heavy horses. In the thickest part of the fray, Jon saw Mance standing tall in his stirrups. His red and black cloak and raven-winged helm made him easy to pick out. He had a sword raised, and men were rallying to him when a wedge of knights smashed into them with lance and sword and long axe. Mance's mare went up on her hind legs, kicking, and a spear took her through the breast. Then the steel tide washed over him. It's done, Jon thought. They're breaking. The wildlings were running, throwing down their weapons. Hornfoot men and cave dwellers and thens and bronze scales, they were running. Mance was gone. Someone was waving Harma's head on a pole. Tormund's lines had broken. Only the giants on their mammoths were holding hairy islands in a red steel sea. The fires were leaping from tent to tent, and some of the tall pines were going up as well. And through the smoke another wedge of armored riders come on a barded horse. Floating above them were the largest banners yet, royal standards as big as sheets, a yellow one with long pointed tongues that showed a flaming heart, and another like a sheet of beaten gold with a black stag prancing and rippling on the wind. Robert? Jon thought for one mad moment, remembering poor Owen. But when the trumpets blew again, and the knights charged, the name they cried was Stannis! 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 Jon turned away and went inside the tent.